like you lost another one.
Welcome back to The Father's Advocate. I'm your host, Attorney Ella Hughes. Last week, we took a break from discussing fathers' rights to discuss a topic that affects men more so than women, and that was the topic of statutory rape. This week, I want to go back to discussing fathers' rights, but with a twist, and that is from a mother's perspective. Before doing so, I want to be frank with you, be transparent, and speak my truth. So when we decided to do the Father's Advocate podcast and YouTube channel, I thought it was important to find out more about fathers' rights, but not necessarily from a legal perspective, but rather I wanted to find out what dads were saying, what they were experiencing. And so as part of my research, I went through a deep dive into social media and anything I can find about fathers' rights. I looked at tons and tons and tons of videos, social media posts, blogs, and comments. And I even looked at paternity court. And having looked at paternity court, those episodes were entertaining, but I saw at least 3 compilation of videos where there were men who had been declared to be the child's father. And then it was later determined through DNA that they were not the child's father. And to say the least, they were very, very hurt by what the mothers had done. Now, having looked at all these posts and blogs and comments and videos, I learned a whole lot. Some stuff I did not want to learn. And so to say the least, I was a bit disappointed and quite frankly, really pissed off. And the reason for that is because I've dedicated the vast majority of my career representing fathers. And if anyone that knows me or have listened to the first episode, now I talk about myself being a woman and a single mother. And I had to be a single parent when my child was born. And I was a single parent her entire years as a minor. And I was also one of those mothers that went to court and asked the court for child support. And based on the comments that I saw from so many dads who bashed women and bashed the system, they would bash me. And I'll just tell you, when I was in college and law school, I did not have the financial means to be able to take my child to daycare. Yes. I didn't have the ability to pay for gas, pay for childcare, pay for her food, pay for rent, pay for gas to get me back to school. I didn't have those finances. So I had to get child support because dad on his own would not pay it. And so because I had this experience as a mother, to represent individuals who believe that I should not have asked the court for child support or what I did was wrong creates a conflict internally. Now, I will say this. I have been blessed with great dads that despite what issue it was, they didn't come up with excuses. They didn't bash mom. They didn't point fingers. They rolled their sleeves up and said, I got to do what I need to do to get my child back with me or so that I can visit. And it didn't really matter what mom had done. Now, what I discovered despite all of this is that most of the comments that I saw that dads made was based out of a lot of pain, anger, and emotions. And my biggest question is whether or not it's justified. And I would say probably. But I also would say that the pain and emotions and the anger is based out of ignorance. And I know that this may upset a bunch of people, but please know that is not my intent. My intent is not to anger folks, and it's not to offend anyone, but mostly to get to the basis and why we need to address this issue. And it is to move past that pain and to create resolutions. Because at the end of the day, you can be angry, you can be in a lot of pain, you can be mad, and you can think you're right, but is it going to get you closer to being with your child? And the answer is absolutely no. It may be the fuel to help you get to where you need to go, but it's not going to help you if you don't know what you're doing. Now, I will be fair and say that having looked at so many blogs and read so many comments and looked at tons and tons and tons of videos, there were at least 2 organizations that did not bash women or the court. Instead, what they did, they focused inward. They focused on improving and inspiring men to do better and considering their part in the drama that has created a breakdown in the family or the child-parent relationship. One of these organizations also have kind of like a school where the dads will attend and they will have to graduate after they've done so many, I don't know, hours or tests or exams or something like that. And I listen to these videos where these dads talk about their experience, like how life was before they got into the program and then how life was after they got into the program. Now, I won't disclose these organizations at this time because it is my hope and my desire that they will be guests on the Father's Advocate. But irrespective of this, what I have determined is that going forward, the Father's Advocate's mission will not only be to represent and advocate for fathers' rights, but also to heal broken families. Because at the end of the day, it really does not matter who is at fault. What really matters is you have an innocent child that was brought into this world because of 2 adults who now have a bunch of drama and can't get it together. And that child is the one that has been affected, not the parents. The other thing is that despite the anger, despite the pain, despite the emotions, it really doesn't matter. What is going to happen if all you do is have anger and you're pointing fingers? And I will tell you, some of this stuff that these dads were talking about, how they were upset with the women and they were upset with the mothers and they were upset with the court. Again, I believe it's based on ignorance. And I say that because there is nothing, absolutely nothing on the books when it comes to law that says that the system is in favor or favors mothers. And I know that for a fact because I do this day in and day out. I have represented fathers who the world have essentially thrown to the wolves and said, there's nothing I can do with you. In fact, I had a client who had a criminal record. He went to a law firm in downtown Atlanta, a big, huge firm, and they got tons and tons of partners. And because of his criminal record, they told him, there's nothing we can do. The best that we can hope to get for you is every other weekend. That's called standard visitation. And then he came to me after spending a lot of money at this law firm. And I represented him. And despite having to pay over $1,000 in child support and only being able to get every other weekend visitation, not only did I get this dad to not have to pay child support, but I also got him custody of his children, which is something that everyone said he could not get because 1, he was a father, and 2, he had a criminal record. So to say that the system favors women is completely incorrect. In fact, the Supreme Court actually outlawed disparate treatment of fathers, and particularly those fathers who had children born out of wedlock in the case of Stanley versus Illinois. And if you want to know more about that, we can discuss it. But as I said before, there is no such thing as the system favoring mothers. But what I will say is that if you're going to go to court and you're going to fight the system, you need to know how to fight. In my experience, women and mothers fight much differently than fathers. Not only do they fight differently, but they are willing to fight. My experience, fathers are not that often willing to fight. If you don't believe me, I have an exercise that I want you to consider. And after you had a chance to look at this exercise, digest it, and even answer the questions, then I want to hear back from you. This exercise is based on several cases I've had in my office, consultations I've had with fathers, and even just basic stuff that I've seen in the comments that dad have made. So here's the exercise. There's a child support order that requires dad to pay mom every single month. There is what's called an income deduction order that takes money out of dad's check every single month towards child support. Dad gets a new job, but he forgets to tell the employer to take money out of my check. In the meantime, mom says, here, dad, you take the child. I don't want to deal with him anymore. And the child now lives with dad. Several years later, Dad receives a letter in the mail from the Office of Child Support saying that Dad now owes $30,000 in child support arrears. Now, Dad is upset. The question to ask, should Dad be upset, and if so, why? The next question to ask, what should Dad have done before receiving the letter from child support? And the third question to ask is, what can Dad do now? I'll give you a hint. The answer to the first question, whether Dad should be upset, is no. Now, I bet you, I'm almost certain, many folks will say that Dad should be upset. And the answer is absolutely not. Now, if you can get the reason why no is the answer, then you're on your way to understanding why the system does not work for women only. I will come back in a couple of days and I will discuss the answer. Please leave me your comments. I want to know what you're saying, because in order for me to help dads and the communities and heal families, I need to know what folks are thinking. Now, as I promised, my guest is Shavonecia O'Kelley. She has not only been a client of mine, but she has been instrumental in helping my office spread the news about fathers' rights. In fact, all of our fathers' rights seminars, symposiums, workshops, law day, anything concerning fathers' rights, Miss O'Kelley has been there from the beginning. And not only has she been there encouraging that we do this, but she has also volunteered. And she was also the person that advocated and suggests that we do this podcast and YouTube channel. I want you to hear from her because she is a mother who had a child whose dad was in and out of his life. And she'll talk to you about the experiences her son went through. And the reason why I want you to hear this is because, as I've said early on in this podcast, is that I don't think it's a good idea for dads to wait until the child becomes 18 or older, for that matter, or they decide, I'll come in, I'll come out whenever I want to. Because, as I've said many times over, children are affected when a dad is not there. Children are affected when dads come in and come out. This is just a short clip of our interview with Miss O'Kelley. I hope you enjoy, and if you want to hear the full episode, it will be available on our podcast as well as YouTube podcast.
So once our son turned a year old, he left. He said, I will go to Colorado. I sent back for you guys, but that never took place.
When he's told you that he's going to Colorado, were you guys still in a good relationship? Were you in a position you're breaking up? What was the deal?
We was in a steady relationship. Far as I thought, we was in a good relationship because the way he presented as, I'm coming back for you guys. I'm just going up here to get established. And I'm coming back to send, I'm sending for y'all. So, just be prepared, be aware that I'm coming back. I'm not leaving my child, leaving you. So that's what I thought. That's what I presumed, that he was coming back, but that never took place.
Your son was 1 year old at that time?
That's correct.
Okay. So how long was he in Colorado before you all made contact?
I had a contact number when he first relocated to Colorado, but I didn't have a physical address. All I knew that he was in Colorado.
Did you all communicate while he was there, at least in the beginning when he moved up there?
A little in the beginning, but not a whole lot.
What point did Dad call back or came to visit? How old was your son then?
He was 13 when Dad reached out to me via messenger to ask, can he come and visit? And I said, give me a moment, because he doesn't know who you are. I got to lay some stuff down. So I had to get things ready because I didn't know which way it was going to go. I didn't know if it was going to go for good or go for bad. So I had to get myself together as well.
What do you mean you had to get yourself together?
Had to be prepared for if it was, which way it was going to go, which direction it was going, if it was going to be good, if it was going to be bad, if I had to pick up some broken pieces and kind of cradle my son, because this is a guy who had been in his life all his life, and he don't know who he is. And so that would have been hard for a mom to have to go through that, have to see her son being hurt from somebody who literally picked up and just left. Mm-hmm. So I had to prepare myself for being hurt as well.
You precluded dad from visiting in the past before you called?
Nope, that was one of the things I have set as a young girl. Coming up, I said if I ever have any children, I will not allow, this like the father for whatever strange reason would not allow him not to see his child because I grew up without my dad partially being there. So I knew how devastating it was for me not to have my dad there full time and to have a child come into this world and I know who the dad was. I never said I'm gonna keep him away from you. So my thing was to let our child know who you are. But he decided to leave. So I guess he was just like, okay, I'm not ready to be a father.
Okay. And so when he called at 13, you didn't tell him he couldn't visit at that time. You just
Nope.
simply said, look, I got to lay some ground rules, right?
Right. And I had to prepare for better for worse.
Okay. And can you tell us
So
what that was like?
um it was scary. It was definitely scary because I didn't know after all these years I haven't seen this person since our son was one. So I don't know. I didn't know what to expect from him, what he looked like per se. Typically you don't forget, but I hadn't seen this guy. So I don't know what his intentions was. None of that. So it was crazy.
At some point, you actually got married. Is that right?
That's correct.
Again, how old was your son when you got married?
I believe my son was 6. Hmm. I believe he was 6.
So from the age of 1 to 6 years old, you were pretty much taking care of your son on your own with your own finances. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you, if you know, can you explain what that process was like, particularly about your son? Did he ever ask about dad? Do you think life would have been easier and better if dad was involved?
Well, since he knew dad as a dad that presented himself was my husband, because that's the only dad he knows. Because my husband been there. My husband used to babysit him before we became a couple, a married couple. So so I don't know how he felt. I don't know. All I can do is just speculate how things may have could have been better once things started presenting themselves behavior wise with my son. So I was like, maybe if his real dad was there or his biological dad was there, would it have been different? So at that time, I didn't think of nothing different. I knew he knew someone that loved him and took care of him as if it was his own. So I didn't see anything at that point. So I concluded everything was good on our son because then he was too young to really know if dad is my dad.
Yeah.
So
So your husband pretty much stepped in as his dad, essentially.
correct.
And so when dad finally reached out when he was 13, what was that process like?
Because what I did, I had to prepare our son to let him know what was getting ready to take place. Because again, if you remember, I said that he didn't know anything about this guy, nothing, absolutely zero. Didn't know what this guy looked like, what his color was, anything. He didn't know nothing. He didn't know what a birthmark on him, nothing. So it was hard because again, that's emotional for our mom had to come to her 13-year-old child, which is a teenager, trying to break something to this child and didn't know how he was gonna process it, didn't know how he was gonna take it. So I had to mentally prepare myself because I have heard stories about how kids find out who their biological dads are when they at a certain age and how it's rough on them. And yeah, so I mean, it went smoother than I thought. To be honest, it really did. I was shocked, and I was still kind of saddened because we shouldn't have to go through that. I shouldn't have to break something to a 13-year-old child who a person should have been in his life from the beginning. Because I never shut him out, I never closed the door, I never said no, you can't visit. I never even talked ill about this guy. Even though he wasn't there, I never talked ill about this guy. I said that I would not do that to my child because my child doesn't deserve any bad language of his dad because I didn't want to mess that up. I didn't do none of that. I just kept it as clean as possible.
Did Dad actually get a chance to visit with his dad? With his dad?
Um, he did. He did get to visit the summer of, I think it was March of 2000, maybe 16ish. No, 14. He was able to get to visit and to see in Colorado. He didn't visit in Georgia. He sent him out a plane ticket and he went to Colorado. So he didn't come to his hometown where he, reside. He sent a ticket for him to send him up there to Colorado. So
Now, did you and your husband talk to Dad to kind of get an assessment?
we did. He actually came down to visit us because he wanted to visit, but again, I had to prepare. I wasn't ready for a disaster because I thought it was going to be a disaster. I wasn't ready for that part. I wasn't strong enough to handle that part. So he came to visit us first, so I could kind of map out who he had become. Because again, we was young, so I, didn't know where he had become as he got older. So I had to map him out, see what his mindset was at. So I was not going at that time, but I wasn't going to allow a guy who didn't know who my son was, who my son didn't know, to come visit because
Right.
I don't know what your intentions are.
Right.
He came to visit me and who my son knows as dad first before
Was
he
that
went to Colorado.
was that a requirement that he visit you all? Or was that something?
Um, on my end, yes, it was because like again, I wanted to feel him out, make sure make sure he was wrapped tight.
Okay.
So yes, I needed him to meet us first
Okay. And he was okay with
before,
that.
and he was okay with that.
Okay. And so, what was that process like when you all finally meet him after 13 years?
It was shocking. It was somewhat emotional, but I still think he did it kind of tacky because he came with his homeboys, which I didn't. And maybe he thought he needed protection. Maybe I don't know, but he came with some guys, kind of emotional a little bit, kind of hurtful, and almost like bittersweet.
How did your son feel? Because I think for our listeners, they're more concerned about from this child's perspective.
That's true. That's understandable. Got you. Now, when we first came to our son, which is me and my husband, who he knows to be dad, he didn't show no emotion that time. I think he maybe shed a tear too, and he was like, "Dad, can I go play my game?" So I didn't read an emotional point at that time, but as time went on, behavior issues had arose. So I knew that it was a disconnect and a connection between his biological that was absent in his life. So at that time, I could presume that he was upset, but he just didn't show physically any emotion, but through his behavior.
Oh, and it almost coordinated immediately after Dad came into his
Yes.
life. How was your son's behavior with your husband after Dad got involved?
Um, that was a rough patch as well. Because once dad came in the picture, then our son to dad who he knows to be dad became a disrespectful situation to where he would talk back, um like he didn't want in the rules and regulation, like he was just a free bird, like he could do whatever he wanted to do. And they done tussle a couple times. But we're moving past that. I just feel like that our son needed love, even though dad, who he knows to be dad, was there since he was about two and a half, three. Um, Once you learn who's your biological, everything kind of goes out the window. Whatever, however you've been brought up, whatever you know to be, who you know to be. I think all this stuff kind of goes out the window because when biological comes in the picture, you you have feelings. Feelings come rushing in all at one time, and you don't understand all of them. And then you start to question yourself: Was I important? Why I wasn't wanted? Why he wasn't there? Um, Even though we couldn't pull it out of him at that time, but we eventually got some of the answers, questions answered, and some of it was he felt like he didn't want him. He didn't love him. Just just how a child felt like they was abandoned, like they didn't care. So I think that's where a lot of those angers, those situations stem from with dad who he knows to be dad. I
Has
don't
your
know.
son tried to reach out to his dad since he now know who he is?
He has, because I always ask him, hey, did you talk to your dad? Hey, when last time you talked to him? Because I ask these questions because I know the pattern of his dad. Don't call, don't send anything. Like he just had a past birthday in January, so this was an ongoing thing. So at that point, I kind of lost all hope, lost all faith. Like, okay, well, and I told our son, that's up to you if you want to deal with it. It made me wrong to say that to our child, but at the point, it's like you already was a disappointment to me. You had someone that got to step in to be my dad, this and the third. So I think it's now just like water up under the sea, I guess, because at this point, I don't even really ask him no more. Have last time he talked to his dad, because it's gonna be the same answer, and it's kind of hurtful because even though I did stay and say that I wouldn't keep him, but I allow him to come into our space because now you have invaded our space because you left our space voluntarily and you didn't do anything. So then when you asked and begged for you to come back in our space, I allowed you to come back. Then you do the same thing that you did, just almost like why not just stay away? Why not? Would you try to wreak havoc in our life or something? Why you just stay away? I understand that people are entitled to their rights and this and the third. I get that, and kids should know who their biological parents are. I get that because there's so many kids in the system that don't know. I get it. I understand, but when you come into a space that has been established, I don't think it's fair and right to come in to upset that space.
What did it do to your son when his dad came in and then visited twice and then been gone for years? What did that do to your son?
Um, he's still very standoffish. Um, he tried to communicate, but he don't know how to communicate. When I say he don't know how to communicate, he's so angry, and I be trying to get to the bottom of why he's so angry. And I don't think I can get out that because he absent. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but it sucks um, to have to deal with the things that you see your child is hurting from. So excuse me. It's annoying at the same time, and then when you have other situations that are that came into play with you not asking for them to, but all I can do is just keep encouraging him to be better than his biological. So I always say if you have children, just make sure you be in their lives. Make sure you remember the times when you went through a rough patch. Remember a time when your biological wasn't there. Not to be spiteful, not to be mean, but the non-custodial parent has to understand whether it's a woman or a guy when they are absent in these children's lives that it is very painful, very hurtful um, for the child and for the custodial parent that is there that's going through and physically see that their child is being hurt and just can't express or be able to they don't understand their feelings and they still trying to understand their feelings. They battle with being a teenager, trying to deal with peers at school, trying to also deal with their parents at home and deal with their siblings. So it's a lot on them. So um, yeah, I just feel that we should break this generational curse because I believe that's what it is. Because sometimes people, um, even though they know their dad wasn't in the picture, they still repeat the same cycle. And I say that because I know his dad wasn't there, because that's what I was told. And me, the time that I have known him, I never visit. I saw his dad. I met his dad. I met his mom, met aunties, cousins, sister, brother, but never met his dad. So I can safely say that his dad wasn't there. So we keep try to encourage our son, to be a good man, but that's a struggle.
Would you say your son's behavior, the bad behavior, is a direct result of his dad coming in his life at a late age and then leaving?
I do believe it is, because at that before that point, everything was cool, everything was hunky dory, everything was good. Kids gonna be kids. They have a little slip up here and there, but this slip up after his dad present who he was, it just went completely off the norm, off the radar, and that just was unacceptable.
And your son's relationship with your husband, what was that relationship like before dad got involved, and what is it like after dad got involved?
Before dad got involved, it was great. It was, they were playing catch. They was, going to the park. They had this little thing where dad, who he knows to be dad, bought RC cars for they do things together as son and father, or son and dad. We did a lot of they did a lot of things together. Like I said, they would go to the park. They would throw ball. They would play with the RC car. They would play games together. They would wrestle, all that stuff that kids need, especially guys need that type of attention. So it was very great.
And then what do you say to those fathers who choose to come in and out of a child's life?
It's not fair, guys. It's whether, like I say, whether if it's a woman or a female, it's not fair to come in and out of kids' lives, because you destroy children. When children get a attachment or get acknowledgement of who that person is, and start gaining a relationship or a trust relationship, and for you to come in and go as you please, that's not fair to that child. That child really suffers in silence sometimes, to where some kids commit suicide because they don't understand what is taking place. They don't understand why dad don't want to be there, why mom don't want to be there. All they know that they was brought into this world to be, hopefully, to be loved, and not to be, thrown away or pushed off to the side or put in the system, because neither parent didn't feel like being bothered with it. So I think that is very selfish of a non-custodial parent.
What kind of advice do you have for either mom or dad?
What advice I would have? Please allow these children to visit with their mom or their dad, because it's very, very hard once a child grows up and find out who their biological parent are. Some people can, survive from, but some can't. It is important, I think, for children to know who their parents are, and to get that relationship and to get that bond. And it may help out with a lot of day-to-day life situations, because there are so many children who are dealing with depression, and sometimes these children or these kids can't understand why, even though you have that parent that is present. But these kids know, like, okay, I have a dad, so where's my dad? Or I have a mom, where's my mom? And then they learn to know that somebody else comes in the picture to step in for that absent parent. That this is when all these things come about. It is very important for our babies to know who their biological parents.
Hey, fathers, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I also hope you were inspired and you learned something new and helpful. As always, you're not in this alone. Don't stop fighting. Your children do need you. If you enjoyed the episode, or if it was helpful to you in any way, please consider following us wherever you listen to podcasts, or on YouTube, The Father's Advocate. Hit the like button, share this episode with other fathers, and subscribe. Also, feel free to leave us a comment or suggestion of topics you'd like us to explore. Please share your thoughts and participate in our online questionnaire. We would really like to know what you think. Lastly, we would like to honor fathers by hosting the first ever father-child athletic competition and father-daughter dance. If you'd like to attend, be a guest speaker, a sponsor, volunteer, or anything in between, please contact us at info@thefathersadvocate.com. See you next week for another episode. Until then, this is the Father's Advocate, Attorney Hughes.